Welcome back, everybody. We're diving deep today in something pretty essential, at least for Christians, and that's spiritual growth. It's all about becoming more like Christ,
Yeah.
right? That whole journey. And we've got some really cool stuff to look at, like the parable of the sower.
Oh, yeah, from Matthew.
Exactly, the Gospel of Matthew. And we've also got this really interesting devotional from the Apostolic Faith Church. But before we get to all of that, we're going to take a little side trip.
Okay. Where are we going?
YouTube.
YouTube. All right.
I like where this is going.
Yeah, you sent over this video, a worship song, actually, and there's this line that really jumped out at me. It says, "It takes a lot of ring to help it grow." Now, I don't know about you, but I've never heard anyone talk about using a ring to help their garden grow. Have you?
Not unless they're talking about some, like, magical garden ring that I've never heard of.
Right.
I'm thinking it's probably, I think it's got to be a metaphor. Like for how much effort you have to put in, how tough you got to be to really grow spiritually. Yeah, like you gotta like wring out all the distractions and really focus on God,
Yeah.
right? And then it goes on to say, get strong each and every day. So it's that consistency too that matters.
Yeah, definitely. It's not a one-time thing. It's about growing closer to Christ every single day. And speaking of daily commitment, that's where this parable we were talking about comes in, the parable of the sower. It's in Matthew chapter 13.
Okay.
And it uses this analogy of seeds and different kinds of soil to explain how people react to God's word, how they receive it.
Yeah, and I think that soil part is really interesting. Can you break that down a bit more? Like what each type of soil means for, spiritual growth?
Absolutely. So first you got the path, right? This is like those people who hear the message, but it just doesn't sink in. They don't really get it. So the seed, God's word, can't really take root like trying to plant on concrete.
Yeah, I get that. Sometimes I hear a sermon or I'm reading a passage and it's like, it just doesn't click.
Hmm.
Maybe I'm distracted or just not really engaging with it.
Exactly. And then there's the rocky ground. This represents people who get all excited at first when they hear the word, but their faith's kind of shallow. So when things get rough, they don't have those deep roots to hold on, and their faith just withers away.
Oh, so it's like they don't have that resilience to handle the tough times. Their faith's too fragile.
Exactly. Then we've got the thorny ground. These are the folks who hear the word, but then all these worldly worries, wanting to be rich, all that stuff, it just chokes out their spiritual growth. Their hearts are too full of other things to let God's word in.
Yeah, that makes me think about how much our priorities really affect our spiritual growth.
Yeah.
If we're just chasing stuff and success, it's got to be hard to really connect with God, right?
Right. And finally, there's the good soil. This is what we all want to be, right?
Yeah.
The soil represents people who hear the word, they understand it, and they let it take root and grow and produce a ton of fruit, spiritually speaking.
And that brings us back to that devotional from the Apostolic Faith Church, right? It talks about the good soil, and then it ties that into the fruit of the Spirit, which is a beautiful picture of what it actually looks like to grow spiritually.
Exactly. Just like a gardener's got to really take care of their plants, we have to be intentional about growing those fruits of the Spirit in our own lives. They're the evidence, the proof that we're actually growing and changing on the inside.
Okay, so let's break it down. What are those fruits we're supposed to be cultivating?
The devotional lists: love, joy, peace, patience, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, and self-control.
Wow, that's quite a list.
Yeah.
Makes you think, right? Right. Which ones are growing strong in our own lives and which ones maybe need a little more attention? What about you? Are there any fruits that you find particularly tough to cultivate?
I think for me, patience, that one's always a struggle, especially these days. Everything's so fast paced. It's easy to lose that calm, persistent spirit that patience needs.
Oh, I hear you. I think for me, it's gentleness. It's so easy to just react,
Hmm.
get defensive. But gentleness is all about responding with kindness, even when things are tough.
Yeah, for sure. It's a constant practice. You're never perfect at it. And then something that devotional brings up too. It's not about being a perfect gardener instantly. It's about working on your spiritual growth bit by bit, consistently, using certain practices.
Like what kind of practices are they talking about?
Well, they really emphasize prayer, Bible study, and then actually putting it into practice, obedience. Those are the keys to growing the fruit of the Spirit, they say.
Yeah, I mean, those are the basics, right?
Oh.
But how do those things lead to actually becoming more loving or joyful? It seems like a pretty big jump from reading the Bible to suddenly having more patience.
Yeah, it's not about suddenly changing. It's more like a gradual process. Think of it this way. When you pray, you're connecting with the source of love itself. You're opening yourself up to God and letting His love fill you up. And the more you feel His love, the more you naturally start showing it to others.
So it's like prayer is like watering the seeds of love in our hearts, helping them grow.
Exactly. And Bible study, that's like giving those seeds the nutrients they need. When we read and think about what the Bible's saying, we get wiser, we understand God better, his character, what he wants for us. And the more we know him, the more we start acting like him.
And that's where obedience comes in, right? Putting all that learning into action.
Exactly. Obedience is the fruit, the result of our faith. It's how we show the world that our relationship with God is real. And when we choose to obey him, even when it's hard, our trust in him gets stronger, and we hear his voice more clearly.
So it's all connected, right? Prayer, Bible study, obedience, they all work together to help us grow that fruit of the Spirit.
They really do. And as we grow that fruit, we become more like Christ. Our lives start reflecting his love, joy, peace, patience, all of it. And that doesn't just affect us, it spreads out to everyone around us.
It's not just about improving ourselves then, it's about making the world a better place, showing God's goodness to everyone.
Exactly. And it's a journey, never really ends. There's going to be times when we mess up, face tough times, maybe feel like we're going backwards.
But just like a gardener wouldn't give up on a plant that's struggling, we can't give up on our spiritual growth. We got to keep going, even when it's hard, knowing God's with us every step of the way.
Absolutely. And he gives us everything we need to grow. He gives us his word, his spirit, and other believers to support and encourage us.
Oh yeah, that reminds me, we haven't really talked about community yet. We're not supposed to do this whole spiritual growth thing alone.
You're so right. We need each other to keep us accountable, to lift each other up, and to help each other when we're down. We learn from each other's experiences, share our struggles, and celebrate our victories together.
Like having a bunch of gardeners working together, sharing tips and advice, helping each other out.
Exactly. And just like different plants need different things to grow, we each have unique gifts and talents that we can bring to the church, to the community of believers.
I love that analogy. So we've talked a lot about being intentional, really putting in the effort to grow spiritually. But what does that actually look like in everyday life? How do we take all these ideas and put them into practice?
That's the big question, isn't it? I think it starts with making that choice, that decision, to put spiritual growth first. It's like saying, this is important to me. I'm going to give it my time and attention, just like I would any other important goal.
So it's not going to happen by accident. We got to really go after it.
Right. And then it's about taking action. Make time for prayer, for Bible study, for thinking about what you're learning. Find ways to serve others, to show God's love in real, practical ways.
It's about thinking about what we're thinking, what we're saying, what we're doing, making choices that line up with that fruit of the Spirit we're talking about.
And it's about finding that community, connecting with other Christians who can encourage us and, keep us honest about how we're doing with all this.
Reminding ourselves that we're not in this alone. God's right there with us, guiding us, making us stronger, and helping us live lives that show his glory.
Beautifully said. So, as we head into the last part of our deep dive here, I want to challenge everyone listening. Think about some real strategies, some resources that can help you grow that fruit of the Spirit in your everyday life. What do you think?
I love that challenge. It's easy to just talk about it, right? But the real test is actually doing it, putting it into practice. So let's brainstorm a bit. What are some actual steps we can take to grow that fruit of the Spirit?
Yeah, practical steps. That's what makes the difference, right? Remember we were talking about gardening? Well, just like a gardener needs their tools, we need tools and strategies to grow spiritually.
Well, we already talked about some of the basics, right? The Bible, that's like our gardening manual, full of wisdom and guidance. And then there's prayer, that's like water for our souls, keeps us nourished. And of course, we've got fellowship, being part of a community, like having a team of gardeners to help us out.
Those are definitely the essentials, but we can do even more. One thing that helps me is focusing on just one fruit of the Spirit at a time, for like a week or a month. Really dive deep into what that fruit means, how you can live it out every day.
Yeah, that makes sense. Less overwhelming than trying to do everything at once.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you're focusing on patience. What are some practical ways to actually grow more patient?
One thing that helps is finding a verse in the Bible that talks about patience and just keep thinking about it all week. For patience, you might pick Romans 12:12. It says, be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer.
Yeah, just let those words sink in and guide you. And speaking of reflecting on things, what about journaling? I find that helps me process things, figure out where I need to grow.
Oh, journaling is great for that. You can look back at your day, see patterns in how you act. those times when you didn't quite live up to the fruit you're working on. You can also write down those times when you did see growth, those little victories that keep you motivated.
It's like keeping a record of how your garden's growing, so you can make adjustments as you go. And like you said earlier, having someone to keep you accountable, that's really important too. Having a friend or a mentor who's on this journey with you can make a huge difference.
Huge. You need that outside perspective sometimes, someone who will lovingly point out your blind spots, but also celebrate your wins with you. And remember, be that friend for someone else too.
Yeah. We're all in this together, right?
Mm.
We need each other. So as we wrap up our deep dive into spiritual growth today, I want to leave everyone with this. This journey, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. There will be tough times, times when you doubt, times when you get discouraged, but it's worth it. Keep going.
Absolutely. The rewards are incredible. As you grow that fruit of the Spirit, you start to experience the fullness of God's love, His joy, His peace, His purpose. You become more and more like Christ, and your life becomes a reflection of His grace and beauty.
That's a beautiful thought. So keep tending that garden, friend. Keep seeking God, keep growing, and keep bearing fruit. It's worth it.